Live, local, late breaking. This is WBAL TV 11 News Saturday morning.
Still ahead on 11 News Saturday morning.
Celebrating the history of the American flag and its significance right here in Maryland. Historian Raffi Andonian joins us with more when we come back. Well, Flag Day was this past week, and it's a day to honor and recognize the meaning behind the American flag. But there is quite a bit of history with the American flag right here in Maryland. And joining us live this morning with more is celebrity historian Raffi Andonian. Good morning. Nice to meet you.
Good morning. So great to be here on the birthplace of the Star-Spangled Banner.
I love it. Okay, so tell us first of all, what makes you a celebrity historian?
Celebrity historian means I go around on television a lot, talking a lot about historic sites, historic events, and how it relates to our present. I think is really important to be able to discuss that.
So important. Of course, this is the birthplace of the Star-Spangled Banner, Fort McHenry. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, Fort McHenry was really important during the War of 1812. And in the War of 1812, of course, is protecting the Baltimore harbor and the city of Baltimore. Remember, the British, during the War of 1812, burned down Washington, D.C. earlier in the war. So if they're going to get into Baltimore, it ain't going to be pretty, right? And so what Fort McHenry is trying to do is defend the city of Baltimore against a professional, huge British fleet and physical army forces that are on the land trying to press into the city of Baltimore. And that's what makes it so important, because that's what Francis Scott Key is going to see. That's going to eventually lead to the birth of the Star-Spangled Banner.
That's because literally you're sitting there and you're looking over the harbor and the bombs were bursting in air, and Francis Scott Key said, hey.
Just like the lyrics say. Now, Francis Scott Key is on a cruise ship, and he is several miles away from the actual fort. He's looking through his spyglass, and he sees this flag with the 15 stripes on it. 15 stripes, not just 15 stars. Today, the flag has only 13 stripes to represent the original 13 colonies, but back then, they were adding stripes to each time a state joined the Union until it became too many. There's actually 18 states in the Union at this time, but the Congress had not updated the flag yet. So there's actually a very special flag that is unique to that particular era, because after this, they didn't keep adding stripes. It went down to the 13, although they did keep adding stars. And that gigantic flag, 30 by 42 feet, the next morning, after a massive bombardment for 25 hours, is where Francis Scott Key is going to see through his spyglass. And that's what he's talking about in the Star-Spangled Banner.
The flag
miles
was
away.
Still there.
The flag was still there. And what happens is they switch the flags up during the storm and then put up this big one when there is victory. But that's what he's talking about. He takes the notes on sheets of paper. He's on the cruise ship for another couple days, goes into the town, and then ends up being printed on a broadside known as a broadside ballad. You thought ballads were only in the 1980s, but this is a broadside ballad is what it's called, because his lyrics that are actually 4 stanzas. We're only seeing one for the national anthem, right? And so people would have known, and he would have noted what tune it's going to go, with, what tune applies to it. And so that starts to spread throughout the country, and as it spreads, it starts to become the unofficial national anthem.
Well, a lot goes into a flag. What goes into changing the flag? How do we get from...
An act of Congress.
Now, literally.
It literally is an act of Congress. That's why they have fallen behind. For 20 years, Congress hadn't acted. That's why it was outdated at that point, but it was still current according to Congress. Now, speaking of an act of Congress, what makes a national anthem is a good related question to that, because prior to this, being widespread, the Star-Spangled Banner, you had a song called Hail Columbia, which we still play when the Vice President enters.
Like Hail to the Chief?
Similar, it's a different song, a little different song, but they're all related, patriotic. There are multiple unofficial national anthems. This spreads in popularity, and because there were so many wars in the 19th century, Mexican War, Civil War, Spanish-American War, by the time we get to World War I, that unofficial popularity makes it the Army's and the Navy's official anthem. And by 1931, more than 100 years after Francis Scott Key, an act of Congress, again, the act of Congress, is what makes it the official national anthem. That's how we got it official. So act of Congress is important to the flag and celebrating and singing about the flag with the national anthem.
And then you've got something right here. What are these?
This is a commemorative coin. You're looking at the head side and the tail side. It's the same piece with both sides. To Fort McHenry. One side is Fort McHenry, which of course is right here in Baltimore, where the famous stand happened. And right here on the other side, tail side, it depicts Francis Scott Key in the national anthem. And you have also a commemorative stamp that is there that the U.S. Post Office put out, unused. You can get these if you go to Fort McHenry, of course, the National Historic Site you can go to, and you can find these.
And coin collecting is still a big deal, especially when they're this important.
Coin stamps, absolutely. It is totally important, right? And when you put up the flag I kind of think of the Francis Scott Key and the Star-Spangled Banner and the stories behind it, because it certainly was consecrated right here in Baltimore at the Baltimore Harbor with only 1,000 men, a mixture of professional soldiers and Maryland militia holding up against professional soldiers both on land and at sea, because the sea guys were there to support a land attack which had started actually a day prior to the Battle of Fort McHenry, but carries into the bombardment. And remember, the morning, remember he talks about the dawn's early light in this day. In the morning when they're looking at it, they don't know that the bombardment's going to stop after 25 hours. He's talking about almost 2,000 shots. Some of these shots are 200 pounds with 10 to 15 pounds of gunpowder in them, raining all over them.
Can't even
Bombs
imagine.
bursting in air. That's what he's talking about. And 1,000 men hold up against that. And then they look in the morning. They still don't know if the British are going to turn around. But we do with hindsight, but we have to put ourselves in the moment and realize they didn't know that. And when they see that, then as they start to turn around and stop the bombardment, that's when you get the celebration, the gun salute, and of course the waving of the huge flag that they pull up. The size of the flag when you go there today is massive. Unless it's storming, they use a different one. But if it's not storming, the size of the flag is huge. The presidential proclamation, the first ever presidential proclamation to fly the flag 24/7, 365 is right here at Fort McHenry by President Truman. That's why they fly it all the time. First ever. And to this day, if we get a new American flag, like when we got the 49th state and the 50th state, the first place it flies is 1 minute after midnight on the 4th of July at Fort McHenry. That's how important this still is today.
All right, I know that you're based in St. Louis, but I would like to offer you a job here in Baltimore. I think you should be at Fort McHenry, and you should be teaching everybody who comes in. You're amazing.
Wonderful, amazing, beautiful histories, cities with a lot of history that shapes American history and the fabric.
Raffi, thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it. Very interesting. Please stay with us. We're going to have more news and weather when we come back. You're watching 11 News Saturday morning.